It had been a day of finding places. Katie discovered that even though you might want to float your boats in the big sink, other people need the sink to wash their hands. Orbie found out that the hall is a great place to line up all your cars until Granny almost slips on one. And they learned that playing with toys takes up a lot of space. Katie and her family were staying at her grandparents' apartment in the big city. It was always fun because they went to see different things in the city. But today, they were going nowhere. It was a rest day, and all of the grown-ups were reading or snoozing. Katie and Orbie were asked to play quietly, and they were always very good at that, as you know, and so they did their very best. After lunch, Katie and Orbie decided to have giant marble races down the long wooden hall. They both shot their marbles, and Orbie's was ahead, and just then, Mom came around the corner and asked them to find something else to do. Mom was afraid Granny might slip on them. And when you're old, falling was a bad thing because your bones were old too, and they could break easily. Katie and Orbie smiled at Mom and picked up the marbles. They headed into their bedroom. Orbie thought a game of hide-and-seek would be fun in the big old apartment. Quietly, he tiptoed down the long hall into the living room. He found a hiding place under the beautiful antique couch. Granny's throw blanket was hanging over the side, and he was sure that Katie would never find him. Katie called out that she was coming, ready or not. As she tiptoed down the hall, she looked for Orbie. She had a feeling he was in the living room and sneaked in through the big door. Orbie could hear a little giggle and knew Katie was on her way. What Orbie didn't know was that the light from the big window behind the couch was shining through the blanket. Katie could see Orbie's shape right through it. She tried so hard not to giggle, but as you can imagine, one occasionally slipped out. She tiptoed over to the couch, and with a swish, she pulled away the blanket, and Orbie was so surprised. He tweeted a shrill, loud Orbie surprise noise, and Katie was so surprised by the noise, she shrieked, and they both raced for home base. As they raced down the slippery, polished wood hall, Orbie did some fancy sliding to try and pass Katie, and they were almost at the bedroom door when Dad came out of his room and caught them in his open arms. Granddad, who had been having a nap, popped his head out of his room to see what the problem was. Mom came from the kitchen telling the two friends that they'd given Granny a terrible fright. Now, I have to tell you that neither Katie nor Orbie, as you can imagine, wanted to scare anybody. All they wanted to do was play. They looked at each other feeling bad, and they hurried to Granddad and gave him a two-at-once kiss to apologize. They went into the kitchen and did the same thing with Granny. Both Granny and Granddad told them that there was really no harm done, but that didn't really help the friends. Kids were noisy, and they just couldn't think of what they could do that would be quiet enough during a resting kind of day. Dad pulled out some of his old books. As a boy, he had enjoyed them. Maybe Katie and Orbie would too. Katie and Orbie sat up on the antique couch in the living room and nestled down with the books. After quite a long time, Orbie felt the need to move around. He jumped up and he did a very silly backflip that turned into a roll on the couch and onto the floor. Mom, who was walking down the hall, reminded Orbie that the living room was for sitting. Orbie knew she was right, and he picked up his book again. A little later, Katie was reading about dancing. She got off the couch and waltzed around the room pretending to dance with the prince. Orbie decided she needed a real prince, so he volunteered. They were very quiet, except for a toot and a giggle that came out. Then Orbie spun Katie so hard that she bumped into an old chair that bumped into a lamp. And the lamp teetered, and Katie looked up and gasped, and Orbie had catapulted up onto the back of the chair and grabbed a lamp. Katie was so happy she clapped her hands. Mom and Dad, who were coming into the living room, weren't happy at all to see Katie hopping up and down in the old precious chair and Orbie sitting on the back of it. As the two friends explained, Mom and Dad looked at each other. Mom asked them to sit quietly a little longer while they talked to Granny and Granddad. Katie and Orbie looked out the window. Not once had they meant to be bad or disrespectful. Orbie tooted that there was just no place for them to play, not even a backyard. When Mom and Dad came in with their jackets on, they found the two friends looking out the window at the big city harbor. Katie turned with a little sad face and told her parents that there was no place to play in the big city. Mom and Dad helped Katie and Orbie on with their jackets. They walked for about 5 minutes when Orbie tooted that he sure did a lot of walking in the big city. Then he noticed Katie's face. Katie's jaw dropped and she squealed with delight. Orbie looked in the same direction and burbled a happy sound. There, right smack dab in the middle of the city, was a huge playground. It had jungle gyms and swings and a pirate ship and a merry-go-round and a huge slide with 3 different kinds of tracks. Katie and Orbie couldn't believe it. Mom and Dad apologized to Katie and Orbie and told them that they really did not know that kids just have to play. Katie and Orbie had been very patient and had worked so hard at being quiet. Now they could let it rip, and let it rip they did. All that was left of Orbie was a pink swirl, and Katie giggled as she zipped from one play structure to another. Katie and Orbie had thought the big city had no special play places. That day they found out how wrong they were. And I hope, if you ever visit the big city, that you'll remember Katie and Orbie and how they found the perfect place for them. It will be perfect for you, too. I just know it.
Did you know? Everybody needs bones. Some are really big, like the bones in your legs. Others are really small, like all the itty-bitty bones in your hands. But the tiniest bone in your whole body is the stirrup bone. It's way inside your ear and looks just like this.